You're welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television. Now, the National Economic Council has resolved to encourage the growth of the automotive industry in Nigeria by improving patronage of locally manufactured vehicles. Well, little wonder, since the National Automotive Design and Development Council said that the country spends about $8 billion each year on imported vehicles. Won't be surprised if it's more than that. Now, the total market size in 2021 was estimated at 1,602. In 2021, it grew from 1,497 in 2020. Will this resolve by the federal government or the National Economic Council bring back automakers and consumers' confidence in the country's made products? We have the former Director General of National Automotive Design and Development Council, Mr. Aminu Jalal, joining us for this conversation. Good morning, Mr. Jalal. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
So I believe we've heard this kind of resolution before. So how confident are you that this resolve by the National Economic Council will bring anything new to the scene?
We hope this time will be different. In particular, if the government use this group for public procurement to ensure all those who want to buy vehicles who go through to get certificate of no objection actually buy from the local assembly plants. And the reason, of course, we want patronage is that you can't develop the industry without adequate market. We have the market actually, but mostly it's being served by imported vehicles, especially used vehicles.
So why do you think that there seems to be preference for imported vehicles compared to the locally at least assembled ones?
Well, actually, initially before, we used to have only two vehicles plants, Volkswagen and Peugeot. So people prefer the Japanese vehicles. But now we do have assembly plants for both the Korean, Japanese, and even the Chinese vehicles. So I think the main factor that really makes people prefer imported used vehicles is the cost. In most other parts of the world, people buy vehicles through loans. In fact, a lot of these loans are actually financed by the vehicle manufacturers themselves, whether it's GM or Ford or even Peugeot, Toyota. They all have a finance arm to finance you to buy their vehicles. Unfortunately, our interest rates is such that it will not be economical to use the bank loan to really buy a vehicle because of the rates. Interest rates are quite high. So that only leaves the government and its agencies, both state, federal, and local government, and the companies. If they can purchase the made in Nigeria vehicles, actually there will be enough market for them to develop so that they can go to, instead of semi-knockdown operations, most of them are doing, they can go to start complete knockdown operations. Then they can now incorporate local content. It's this local content manufacturing that actually brings a lot of the jobs we require, because there are over 2,000 parts in the vehicle, and each part can support an industry. In fact, the former 504, when we used to make it, the plant had over 50 suppliers, and they all have manufacturing plants supplying these parts to make up the Fusion 504. Unfortunately, when the production stopped, most of them went out of business. So that is the reason why the patronage is quite important.
Okay, so you talked about local content manufacturing now, and of course, because we see that we have 31 licensed producers in the country as at October 2021, but only about 7 companies seem to be assembling at this time, even though with capacity of 205,000 vehicles a year, we know that we are far below that, and of course, huge funding challenge, infrastructure, capacity gaps, and like you mentioned, local content manufacturing. So from your point of view now, where should we start solving this problem? If the federal government is talking about increasing local patronage, and yet we have this myriad of challenges, where should we start dealing with the issues in the automotive industry from?
Well, the first one is the patronage, because by then they will have the volumes. Then we have to really control the importation of vehicles through our borders. In fact, government have been making efforts. In fact, over 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, government declared that all vehicles imported must come through our ports so that they will pay the correct and necessary duties. But up to now, we still have vehicles coming in through the borders that do not pay the adequate duties, which means they are cheaper, which means our industry cannot compete. So that is the reason why this patronage issue is really very important. In fact, this is not the first time actually government have been resolving. I think the first time was when General Obasanjo was the military administrator, or rather head of state, when he declared that 504 and Volkswagen should be the vehicles that Nigerians should use, all government officials. I remember at that time, both the state and local governments, the governors and the president were using Mercedes-Benzes. They were auctioned off, and 504 was the official car. Then in 1984, there was a government circular that mandates all government agencies buy a vehicle from the local assembly plants. And then during both the Obasanjo and Johnson administrations, there have been periodic calls for this patronage. So I think if we cannot patronize the industry obviously cannot die. You can't have an industry without customers. And right now, while a lot of individuals may not have the funds to buy brand new cars, especially when there is no financing, but the government itself and its agencies. And then I would like also the government, if they can work with the Automotive Council and the banks and so on, to see whether we can have an affordable vehicle financing scheme so that individuals can afford to purchase from the assembly plants.
Exactly. I was going to come to that because when you have obviously talked about the cost of locally assembled vehicles, and of course you don't blame the manufacturers because they have a high overhead cost. And I remember having a conversation with someone in the industry, and he told me one of their major problems is that you don't have a lot of or enough cottage industry, so you don't have those who can produce the bolts and the nuts, and those things are supposed to be locally manufactured. So all these things are imported, and this also, of course, adds to the overhead costs. Is there no way of, dealing with this? This will also create employment for Nigerians anyway.
Yes, but the local manufacturer of components needs scale. I'll give an example. The old 504, there was a factory in Port Harcourt making radiators for 504. They were making in the 1970s, 80s, they were making over 50,000 radiators a year for 504. There's also two glass companies in Ibadan, Isoglass and TSG. There were also two of them making all the glasses for 504, for Fujo 504. So by the 1990s, the production of 504 dropped from over 50,000 a year to 2,000. So these factories were forced to close because you can't have a factory that makes only 2,000 units in a year. This is something they can do in 2 weeks. And then they close the factory for the next 50 weeks. So the local component manufacturing depends on the volume from the assembly plants. I think the minimum volume for most of these items is in the region of about 10,000, 20,000. Except for large items, big items that you can produce maybe 1,000, 2,000 in a year. But if you are making like breakfast, like glasses, like batteries, unless you have a volume of in the region of about 10,000 units per year, it's not economical to set up. So that is why everything comes back to patronage. Because if the assembly plants are patronage, their volumes will go up. Then once their volumes go up, then component manufacturers will come, will open up and supply them. In fact, like I said, over 50 component manufacturers have closed down. We had breakfast alone, we had over 5 companies or 6. They have all closed down. Only one was operating, is still operating. Battery companies, we used to have about 8. I think only one is working now. So that is, everything depends on the volume, and we have the volume. It's just that the volume is not in Nigerian products, it's for overseas products.
So what, from your perspective, apart from this resolve by the federal government, which, I mean, like you have noted, it's not the first time we're hearing this now, how do we change this scenario? How do we maximize this potential in this industry that we have? I mean, we have the capacity to do 205,000. We're not doing even 1/10 of that. And like you said, there's no volume, there's no patronage. How do we change this story?
Well, I give you an example. The new incoming governor of Anambra State, Charles Soludo, he mentioned he will use innocent vehicles as his official vehicle. And also the former governor, Peter Obi of Anambra State, also made sure he patronized those vehicles. All the school buses were from innocent. Even all the chiefs in Anambra, he bought them innocent jeeps. So we have to be patriotic and patronize our products. Because when we do that, we generate other businesses, and then we create jobs, and then the state governments themselves will get taxes. We get paid additional taxes from the salaries of the workers, and then the federal government will get this company's tax and so on. And also this component manufacturing also will rely on raw material we have.
Yeah.
For instance, if we are doing batteries, we have lead in Abakaliki, for instance. We can easily use that lead to make batteries. So it's a kind of multiplier effect. In fact, one job in the assembly plant usually creates 3 other jobs in component manufacturing, and about 5 others in the raw materials supply chain. So it is a cascade. In fact, that is why many countries have this industry or are developing it. All over the world, there are over 40 countries with an automotive industry. In Africa, the ones with a developed industry, that is, those with those assembly operations, local content incorporation, South Africa, Egypt, and Morocco. Then others, there are about 7 others who have assembly operations like us: Senegal, Ghana, Cameroon, Algeria, Kenya, Rwanda. So the whole idea of starting with semi-knockdown is to create sufficient volume, then so that you can continue to go to complete knockdown operations. Then you can now get local content. But once we continue to patronize the overseas industry, we can never get there.
So in the midst of all of this, we are talking about electric vehicles. That's the in thing now, because we're talking of clean energy. So in February 2021, the NADDC, in collaboration with the Stallion Group, unveiled the first locally made electric car. And the director of that, of the National Automotive Design and Development Council, stated that the goal is that by 2025, 30% of passenger cars driven in the country will be electric powered. We're not done with the normal vehicles. We are talking of electric vehicles. Do you see this as being achievable?
Yes, but we have to do a lot of other things, because electric vehicles, as you said, needs electricity to charge the batteries. I know government is working to improve our electricity supply. Last time I was traveling in Kaduna area, I did see the high tension they are doing to increase the transmission capacity. I think right now it's just about 5,000 megawatts. They are increasing it to, I think, 7.5 to 10 to 20 in the not too distant future. So yes, while government is working on the electricity supply, we still have issues with the supply of electricity. And this one depends on adequate, uninterruptible electricity supply. And also there are other things like government should do, for instance, to encourage charging stations. You know, all over the world, wherever you have electricity or electric cars, you have public charging stations. Yeah. Of course, in some countries, it's the automotive assembly plants themselves that are setting up charging stations like Tesla. But if you look at Mobile, Shell, and others, they are all setting up, they are actually investing in charging stations. Because they know that if we have electric vehicles, nobody will buy their petrol.
Somebody will charge
so they're investing in charging stations. So we have to start to work with the government, the oil companies, to start setting up charging stations.
All right, Mr. Aminu Jalal, I do hope before we get to the charging station that we can at least get the vehicles out first, and then we can talk about the charging stations. Thank you so much, former Director General of National Automotive Design and Development Council, Mr. Aminu Jalal, for joining us on the show this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.